Alrighty, so I'm Sam, as most of you guys know, and today I'm going to be presenting an article I found from the Journal of Applied Sports Psychology titled A Retrospective Investigation of the Perceived Influence of Coaches, Parents, and Peers on Talented Football Players' Motivation During Development. Um, the study was conducted by Dr. Brian McCann of Glasgow Caledonian University in Glasgow, Ireland, and it is studying the desired motivational climates of elite youth footballers. I also want to mention they are talking about what we would refer to as soccer, not American football, obviously. But they look at different agents of social change when it comes to motivation and how these roles change throughout a young athlete's development. So, for the background and purpose of this article, some of the background is this article was published in the Journal of Applied Sports Psychology in 2018, and the methods it uses are qualitative, and they use retrospective interviews talking about these young footballers' short careers so far. The purpose of this study is to determine the influence of coaches, parents, and peers on football players' motivation during the course of their youth development. And another purpose is to identify factors that may improve or hinder motivation during their development. In addition to this, they want to provide evidence to support coaches, parents, and peers in their efforts to optimize motivation and, in turn, optimize performance. So, as far as the methods go, they would conduct phone interviews using pre-prepared, semi-structured scripts, and these interviews were between 35 and 65 minutes long. One issue with this is that they weren't able to pick up on any body language with any of the participants, so that's quite a bit of data that was left out. But some of the theories that McCann uses to sort of group a lot of these quotations are self-determination theory and the achievement goal theory. They looked at determining athletes' perceptions of their own motivation, depending on their environment and the people that surround them. And all of the interviews were transcribed, and individual quotes and sentences were placed into different groups where they clearly aligned with existing theories, which I will touch on later. So as far as participants go, there were 4 male athletes that were interviewed, and they were an average of 18 and a half years old, and 4 parents were chosen for interviews as well, 3 fathers and 1 mother. And I should also mention that all of these athletes were from what the authors called an elite football development program. So they may have been playing professionally or semi-professionally in Ireland. I'm not really sure. They were sort of vague on this. But as far as findings go, they identified 5 categories of social agent influence, and the social agents they're referring to are coaches, peers, and parents. So first, they touch on relationship factors, and the findings essentially were as development advances, parents diminish in their level of social influence. So as a player gets older, he hears more from coaches and peers than he does his parents. As far as interpersonal factors, they stated that everybody involved in the development of these athletes should be focusing on promoting intrinsic motivation. And a notable quote from one of the athletes' parents was, "You need to be self-motivated." As far as support for development, these parents made pretty big lifestyle contributions as far as taking care of these athletes, housing them, being able to afford a good diet, being able to afford recovery, training, transportation to and from practices. And one interesting part that they mentioned was they said parents were essentially gatekeepers of participation, that participation would be completely out of the realm of possibility without the parents providing for these basic needs. So all these needs need to be met so that the individual is comfortable enough to focus on elite football, which is very time-consuming and mentally taxing. So there are a lot of different aspects of life that need to be taken care of outside of participation in the sport. And then they touched on feedback and evaluation, and all the social agents they mentioned help provide a framework on how daily results align with long-term goals. An example of this would be framing failure as a challenge or focusing on processes instead of outcomes. A big part of this is that the influence of coaches, peers, and parents, the roles of coaches, peers, and parents shift throughout the developmental stages. So this is a graph kind of showing what I just discussed, and these are the higher order themes that they pulled from a couple of the theories that I mentioned earlier. So I know I'm breaking the rule. This is technically 7 slides, but they also looked at these athletes throughout different stages of their lives. The stages they described were sampling, specializing, and investment. And sampling is when these athletes were young enough to be participating in multiple sports. What we would be calling diversifying. Specializing is very similar to what we've discussed in class. And then the investment stage is later on in their lives when the parents begin to have to, put in a real investment, because a lot of these teams are traveling, long distances, and you have to pay for hotels, the transportation itself, food, plenty of these different things. As far as implications go and how this affects us, the results of the study suggest that coaches should focus on fostering motivation and development first and foremost, and not focusing on outcomes. In addition, parents and peers should create a supportive environment that encourages goal setting. Peers are important within football and outside of it by providing emotional support and fostering motivation. And all in all, this article suggests a youth-centered approach that is similar to the American development model that we discussed in class that USA Hockey championed and is shared with the rest of the U.S. Olympic organization. So, thank you guys.